Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of 100 Words or Less, the podcast. I'm your host, Ray Harkins, with you as always to bring another riveting conversation to your earbuds or car speakers or whatever else you listen to this on. Thank you for joining us. The guest this week is Jeff Casazza, because I didn't ask him how to pronounce his last name. He is the CEO, boss, whatever you'd like to call it, head honcho of Run for Cover Records, a very awesome and reputable independent record label that is on the rise, is hot, is happening. My schmoozy business guy talk right there. But anyways, more on Jeff in a minute. Here are some items of business and just general observations that I'd like to share with you. Visit 100wordspodcast.com. I know I harp on it every week, and for those of you that the cries go ignored, please go there. Sign up for the email newsletter that I send out once a week, just summarizing what's been happening and also giving you a sneak peek at the upcoming guests. So just go ahead and do that. And then you can also donate to the show if you are feeling ever so generous. I will be pushing something in the month of April. That's the fundraising month. So if you want to get a head start on it, by all means do that. I'm living with my parents right now, and some of you may think that's a sad thing, but for those of you that pay attention on a week-to-week basis, my house is in disrepair. I'm actually recording it right now at my house, and I'm like a week away from being done from all of this remodeling and leak repair and all this other stuff. So I feel like the first 2 months of 2015 have been like 2 years. So much has happened, but at the same time, things go by so slowly. So anyways, for those of you that are constantly worried about me, I'm just giving you an update. So maybe another week or so. But something I've learned about staying with my parents again, it makes you act old in the sense of, I'm like upstairs in bed at like 8 to 8:30, just like reading a book. And in some respects, it's kind of nice to be like that and not be like, all right, I'm playing video games until like midnight or whatever after the kid goes to bed. So yeah, it's kind of nice to, sort of fall into a nice routine and pattern. And then like when I go out to a show, my parents are like, what, you're leaving the house this evening? And it's like, well, yeah, I go out at night sometimes. Just because my wife and my mom and my stepfather, like, they don't do much at night. They kind of lock in, they're in for the nights. This is what's happening. So when I subvert that, they're like, whoa, that's weird. I can't believe you have that much energy. It's like, all right, that's kind of funny, but that's me. A new opportunity has been put on my shoulders recently, and I'm mulling over the next steps in my life, as it were, from a professional standpoint. Not saying I'm like taking any new jobs or anything like that, but it's always interesting when that sort of, I wouldn't even call this a fork in the road moment, but just, decisions weigh on you. And you kind of sift through all these pros and cons, and you go through all these decision-making processes that will hopefully lead you to a conclusion. And it's just interesting. And honestly, it's exciting in a way because I haven't gone through one of these sort of larger decisions in quite some time. So it feels nice to shake it up a little bit. So if those of you who are going through that right now, I can empathize and I understand what you were going through because we were doing the same thing at the same time. So ultimately, I always arrive at the conclusion where it's just like, is this an exciting opportunity? Will this be fun and engaging? And ultimately, will this better me from a financial sort of life decision standpoint? And if you can answer like yes to those three questions, then why wouldn't you do it, So anyways, just wanted to keep you updated on that. And then I also recently did some tracking for a vocal project that at some point in the near future will be debuting. And this is not from one of my old bands rearing its old head. It's not for taken. It's for a fun little side project, So I'll reveal that at a later date. But I did that this past week, and it's really fun because I forgot how much fun yelling into a microphone from a studio perspective is. So anyways, let's talk about Jeff. So Run for Cover, most of you probably are aware of its existence at this point. And if you're not, then just Google Run for Cover Records, and you will be amazed and surprised at the great roster they've assembled over the past couple of years. And honestly, since its inception. He's made a very distinct pivot over the past couple years into the more sort of indie rock, more genreless area of the label than he did previously. But Jeff's a good dude. I've known him for quite some time, and I've wanted him on the show. And interestingly enough, when I first approached him, he was like, I don't know, man. I don't give a very good interview. And we actually talk about that at the very beginning of the show. So I just found it interesting because usually people that I approach that I know are usually pretty interested in coming on the show because they know that it'll be hopefully a fun time as long as I don't do them a complete injustice. So, but yeah, Run for Cover Records, incredible label. They've been doing some amazing things and are just building their own thing over there, their own cool small business. And I was excited to talk to Jeff about that. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Jeff, and I will talk to you afterwards. Video Records, that was like, I don't know, like 2008 or something like that. But I remember meeting you for the first time at Sound and Fury in 2009,
I think.
Was it 2009? That was the year of Oxnard, I think, right?
Actually, it might have been 2008. I don't remember.
No, I think it was 2008 because that was the year before I took ownership of the festival the next year.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, wait, it was 2008 because that was the summer that the Title Fight 7-inch came out because it came out at Sound and Fury.
Exactly. But I just remember reaching out because it's one of those things. I have this, I don't know, this sort of like hardwired radar in myself where it's like I see people that are doing cool things within the context of independent music, and I wouldn't even say like a struggle, but I just see sometimes the overwhelming nature that tends to envelop people when stuff starts to get real, when it's like, oh shit, like I got to do all this. I wanted to specifically start at that point where it was like, considering that most people that start labels obviously never expect it to grow quote unquote fast during that time, shit was moving pretty quick for you. Was it mentally just like absolutely overwhelming for you to kind of be like, all right, like I'm in school, but at the same time, like all these records are just doing really, really well. Was it more stress than pleasure?
Yeah. I think I was doing a lot of things incorrectly and kind of had unrealistic expectations of what, was even possible for one person to be doing. I mean, obviously, I was definitely struggling, and that was pretty obvious to see. But I think that I thought that it was possible to be doing a good job of doing everything by myself while being, a full-time student, which it obviously wasn't. So I kind of would beat myself up about it and just, I was kind of confused about why things weren't going as well as it seemed like they should. But, I eventually figured out it was because what I was attempting to do was not really possible.
When you were in times of like beating yourself up, was it one of those things like you were hard on yourself because you felt like you were doing a terrible job at everything? Or was it specifically certain things that you just felt like you were so falling short on?
It wasn't really everything because the music that we were releasing, I knew was awesome and I knew that people cared about it. But I guess it was probably everything else besides that. Right. Actually executing the things the way they should have been executed was definitely the issue. And yeah, I just didn't, even if I had someone helping me at the time, I'm not sure it would have really made a difference because I don't think it would have been the right person. I tried to like rope friends into getting involved really early on, but, obviously no one had as much emotionally invested in it to actually care enough because it was a lot of work,
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and I'm sure too, where it's like you always see that especially with record labels where it's like you bring in your friends who have the same level of experience or less than you, and then it's like the blind leading the blind.
It's just like two idiots being like, "Do we do this or I don't know?"
Dude, that's exactly what it was. I mean, honestly, it's like that's exactly how I'm, what I'm doing with Chris No Sleep, where it's like I just saw, and like honestly, what I was attempting to do, but I didn't really have the the ability to do it at the time for you, where it's like, I just saw where you were at and I was like, Jeff, I just want to help you, man. Like, I just see, I just see where you're at. And it's like, it is that overwhelming feeling of like, you don't know like who to talk to. Cause there's no, it's like, what are you going to do? Post an ad on Craigslist, like independent record label needs help. Like,
yeah.
And then not like the quality of people that you'd get from that perspective would be any good. So it's like,
yeah, it would be ridiculous.
Right. But so backing up, you born and raised, you were born in New Hampshire, yeah?
I was born in Massachusetts, lived in Massachusetts until I went to high school, and then I ended up going to a boarding school in New Hampshire.
A boarding school in New Hampshire. Was that because you were a bad kid, Jeff?
No. Whenever people ask, I'm the last time someone asked me if I did something to end up going to boarding school, I made up a ridiculous reason as to why I did. Accidentally like killing someone when I was a kid or something,
Right.
But no, my town just has a really bad school system. And a bunch of my really close friends were going to the same school, and it's just kind of what my parents wanted me to do. Yeah, I grew up in a weird town. It was a lot of like really old, huge, expensive houses, really nice town with like a really nice downtown area, but had like a huge drug problem, a huge heroin problem, and a really bad school system. And it's just kind of a weird place to grow up. Like I had friends in my town, but then kind of got disconnected from the whole thing pretty quickly.
What was the name of the town?
Newburyport is actually the most like northern town in Massachusetts, right before New Hampshire.
Okay.
It's right on the water. It's a great place to grow up. Just kind of a weird vibe.
Right, sure. So was it one of those things where it was like because like a sort of industry had left, so that's why there was like a sort of seedy element to it. So there was like old money versus no money there as well.
Yeah, I guess that kind of is what it was.
Okay.
A lot of people just couldn't get out of the town, and I guess I don't know really what causes that. I could probably name 3 people that I grew up like being close friends with that got out of Newburyport, which is just weird because it's a completely normal town.
Right. Yeah, no, that's interesting. That sort of like small town mentality of like, well, I guess after I graduate high school, I'm just going to work at the gas station or whatever,
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So what were your parents doing there as far as like, were they working there, or what sort of professions did they have as you were growing up?
My dad has worked in Boston since I've been alive, just doing investing, playing with other people's money, I guess.
Okay.
So I became pretty familiar with Boston early on. He would always like wake up at like 4 a.m. and go to work at like 4. He'd drive to Boston, probably like 45 minutes away, like at 4 a.m. just to beat the rush hour traffic. That's ridiculous.
Uh-huh.
So I would sometimes, if I didn't have to go to school or whatever, was home on vacation or whatever, I would wake up super early and go into Boston with him, and then just go to Newbury Comics all day long, or go to Borders all day long to the music section and just like
hang out,
read Marilyn Manson's autobiography in one sitting, or go buy a Converge record in Newbury Comics.
Right.
So and I started doing that at a very young age and just became pretty familiar with the city and like the hardcore scene in Boston pretty much from doing that. Right.
Just by like by sheer boredom, but then being like, oh, there's some cool stuff here.
Yeah.
And your mom basically just was a housewife taking care of you. Do you have a little sister or?
I have an older sister.
Okay, that's right.
But yeah, I mean, more or less, but both of my sister and I went away at such an early age. It became, that is what my mom did, but the kids were out of the house pretty early on.
Right. As you started to, kind of grow up and matriculate through, junior high and elementary school and stuff like that, what sort of kid did you find yourself being? Because you strike me as a person, this is, just a value judgment, but you strike me as a person where it's like you could kind of insert yourself in most social situations and you could kind of get along with everybody, or did you kind of keep to yourself?
I guess a combination of both. I definitely had like a varied group of friends, and I was friends with like skaters, and I would skate a lot, but also was into like some really nerdy stuff as well. Ever since the internet came out, I've been like a pretty involved heavily with the internet. As soon as my family got a computer, I don't think I've gone to sleep, before 3 a.m. just because
you were
of
just
the resources that were available to me.
right. So when the advent of the internet came into your life, what were you doing? Were you doing chat rooms? What was your big thing?
I was super into making websites really early on. My elementary school actually had like an intro to HTML class, which haven't really. I've asked some other people if they ever experienced that, and no one's really known what I was talking about. But I definitely was lucky to start learning stuff like that pretty early on. I was super into like Korn and Limp Bizkit and stuff like that around like when I was like 11 or 12. And, I had like a Korn fan page on GeoCDs, and, I was just like doing whatever I could, to get myself more interested in music. And
sure.
I guess that's how that manifested, was in a Korn fan page on GeoCities.
Dude, that's where all good things start, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. I remember it completely blowing my mind that I made this Korn website, and I could go upstairs and access it from a different computer or any computer on the internet. I remember that just being like so crazy, dude, that I made something that was on the internet.
Absolutely. Like when once your young brain started to wrap its head around like what you could do, even if it was like as simple as chatting with someone else, where you're just like, wait, you're real? Like you meet a person. Oh man, that shit's so weird. So how are you?
Weird.
How were you exposed to like the sort of early nu metal scene? Was that just sheerly through the radio?
No, definitely not the radio. I was always bitter about the fact that the radio didn't play that music.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I guess out in California, it's a little more prevalent to have stuff like that on the radio.
Yeah, no, it's true, because that's definitely because you're in your early 30s or late 20s. How old are you?
I actually turned 29 today.
Oh, dude. Happy birthday. I'm terribly sorry to be hounding you on your birthday.
No, I knew it was going to be my birthday. It's not a problem.
That's funny. Well, happy birthday, Jeff.
Thank you very much.
We are actually making podcast history. I have never podcasted with someone on their birthday. That was when I was, 12, 13. K-Rock here in LA was that, like, they were totally on top of that. But I get that's true. I didn't think about it where it's like other radio stations across the country aren't as quote unquote cutting edge as what I experienced.
Yeah, and much like I was obsessed with the internet early on, I was also obsessed with the radio. I would just everyone did this, but I would sit in front of the radio all day long and just wait for songs to be played so I could tape them and then listen to them over again, and half the time the DJ would be talking over the first 20 seconds of the song, but it didn't matter at all to me.
Right.
And I would just make these tapes of all these songs, and I would call into the radio station and request Korn singles and stuff. And I actually don't really remember how I got into that stuff because, no parent wants their kid listening to Korn or Marilyn Manson when they're 13.
Right.
My parents at first, probably when I was a little younger than that, were kind of weird about me listening to, stuff with parental advisory stickers on and whatnot. It kind of got thrown out the window pretty quickly, and I think they realized it didn't really matter, and it wasn't going to have some crazy effect on me if I listened to a White Zombie CD, with a parental advisory sticker on it.
Right. It's that you weren't immediately going to turn into a degenerate.
Yeah.
I
think it was pretty obvious that I was passionate about that stuff early on, and my dad was super cool and took me to see so many bands, that I think back on now, and it's just crazy that I even got a chance to see.
Mm-hmm.
Like I saw Pantera and Black Sabbath and Slayer all on the same day.
Oh yeah. Dude, so would your dad actually go with you to the concert, or would he drop you off? Okay.
Yeah, he would take. Yeah, he would rather go, to 5 concerts than let me go to one by myself. Like that definitely wasn't an option. Nor do I think he was wrong for thinking that, because a 13-year-old Jeff running around Ozfest in 1997 probably wasn't the best idea.
No, that's amazing. Well, I always love that when I hear that parents are obviously invested in their sort of kids. I mean, not only well-being, but just like kind of encouraging their taste in some respect, and like they actually take them to shows. Like I think that's a huge thing for parents to want to like take on.
Yeah, definitely. My dad got me into music, but music isn't a huge part of his life by any means. Growing up, he just loved like Queen and Meatloaf and that stuff, and I got into Queen at a really young age, and it kind of just kept going from there. And because of my dad, I saw like Smashing Pumpkins. I saw Blink-182 on the Dude Ranch tour.
Classic. These are
crazy stuff. Like
formative experiences.
Oh yeah, the first concert I ever went to was the Cranberries in like '95.
Oh, dude, we may have seen them on the same tour. Were they touring with Toad the Wet Sprocket?
No, it was with Cracker.
Oh, okay.
Same thing.
Equally as sick.
Yeah, I actually saw Toad the Wet Sprocket last summer though. So.
Dude, sounds like, I mean, because my dad definitely took me to concerts too. I definitely saw this was in like, '92, so at the complete explosion of just check out this lineup: Gin Blossoms, Spin Doctors, and Cracker in Las Vegas. Like
I've seen every one of those bands, so that is awesome.
Yeah, we are 100% products of our alternative generation.
Definitely.
Which makes absolute sense that Run for Cover is at the forefront, the 90s revolution currently. So when you because I know you've mentioned in previous interviews that a lot of the introduction to more independent music, for lack of a better term, was definitely through like you said, skating and like zine culture and stuff like that. When you started to kind of discover that stuff, did you feel like you were tripping onto a secret in some capacity, where it was like, hey, not all my friends are into this?
Yeah, it definitely blew my mind. I remember I was skating with my friends from my town, and one of them had an AFI CD sitting on like the curb next to us, and I was just like, "What's this?" And he's like, "Oh, it's this punk band AFI." I went home, and I guess this must have been like '98 maybe. Like the record was "Shut Your Mouth and Open Your Eyes." But somehow I went home and listened to them on the internet. I don't even know how I could have done that, but I did that. And I guess it was like Napster or something. I guess that existed then. Mm-hmm. So I was just like, it was aggressive music that wasn't, goofy and weird and gothic, like the stuff that I was listening to, which kind of confused me because I didn't understand why something like AFI was labeled as a hardcore band. When, I'd listen to it, I'd be like, Slipknot's like way heavier.
Way heavier, right?
Like, why is this hardcore?
Dude,
like, whatever.
For sure, because we were so young in that there's no genres. It was boundaryless.
Yeah.
So you were like, why is this labeled this? But this is for posers, but this is way gnarlier.
Way heavier. Yeah, there was at my local CD store, which I was super lucky to have, a record store within walking distance. Didn't have like the most incredible selection of what I was into, but they had like a punk hardcore section, and the dude who ran the store, his father owned it, but he was usually the one working there, turned me on to a lot of stuff. Like I think the first hardcore record I've got was Blood for Blood record on his recommendation.
Nice.
And that kind of blew they're still one of my favorite hardcore bands, but that definitely blew my mind as a young kid. And I think it's stuff like that kind of made me understand like what hardcore was. But I remember getting like an In My Eyes record and being like, how is this called hardcore? I don't understand. It's like not heavy in any way.
Right. Especially from what you were coming from. It's funny too, because a lot of your experiences, like the way that you're describing your levels of obsession, are very, I think, are very indicative of like an only child experience. But it's funny because how much older is your sister than you are?
She's 2 years older. We look nothing alike and could not be more different than we are.
Okay, so you guys were kind of both on your own pattern, so to speak?
Yeah, definitely. She is like pretty much a genius. She went to the #1 high school in America and then ended up going to Northwestern and just like was killing the school game the whole time. And I was just kind of doing everything else that wasn't that.
Right. So when you went away to boarding school, like, did you care about school, or was it just like, oh dude, I'm here, this sucks, I'm just going to put my head down and get through it?
High school was actually amazing. The school was kind of geared towards people who weren't incredible at school. It wasn't like I wasn't in like special education programs or anything, although they did have that, but it had like the beginnings of like a sort of an alternative school, but it didn't go too far in that direction. Like our headmaster was gay, which, was kind of indicative of how the school operated. It was very open-minded. There was a snowboarding team. You could help cut wood to, help heat the dorms if you wanted to. It was a pretty different high school experience. And I actually had a great time.
Did you dedicate yourself to kind of the academics side of things, or were you more interested in the social stuff?
Not the academic side. I didn't completely blow it. I kind of was just like a C+ student the whole time. And then towards the end of my high school career, I kind of got my shit together, and it was just like, I'm going to see if I can get on an honor roll just to see if I can do it once, and I did, and it didn't really matter.
Right.
And I kind of forgot about it immediately after graduating.
Right.
But yeah, it was more kind of, I had friends obviously and did like extracurricular stuff, but I was kind of really into my own stuff that, I had friends who also listened to punk and hardcore and whatnot, but I was like really, really into it. And that kind of ran my life even in the middle of nowhere in New Hampshire.
And so usually the notion of people, either starting or running record labels is because they themselves, like, obviously either can't play in a band or they don't have any sort of musical talent. But did you ever try to play in bands or played in a band?
I messed around with friends in high school, but not really, which is weird because, I do play guitar and I'm all right at it. Definitely not amazing by any means, but I don't know if I haven't really decided if I think I'm actually capable of playing guitar in a band or not, but I plan on figuring it out eventually.
I think that's so funny because like the ability is usually never put into question when you're obviously, younger, because you're just like by the sheer fact that like if you own a guitar, you're a guitarist and like you can probably play in a terrible punk band.
Yeah.
But so technically have you ever played a show?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say that I've done that like once.
Okay. Sure.
Oh, I also, I guess I completely blocked this out of my mind, but I was in a band when I was in college in Boston.
Okay.
I sang in a hardcore band that never really came to fruition. But we put a lot of effort into it and recorded a demo that just didn't end up being what we thought was good enough to do anything with.
Okay.
But it was members of Guns Up and Have Heart, which it was obviously cool, really cool 8 years ago.
Right. And so what college did you go to?
Suffolk University. It's like right in the middle of downtown Boston.
Okay. And was that because you were excited to do that, or were you kind of just like, buying more time to sort of figure out what you wanted to do with your life?
Well, I never didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, or that the record label that I already started was, an option. I guess college just seemed like the next thing to do, and my parents really wanted me to do it. And they knew I wasn't going to do it on my own without them pushing me to do it, which I guess I might have tried, but the fact that I graduated is a complete miracle. And I think my parents still don't even believe it could probably happen, but it did.
Right. No, that was something I was going to bring up later, where it was like, you seemed dedicated to that fact that you were going to finish college, even in the midst of all the chaos that you were going through as Run for Cover was growing. Was that due to the fact that you were just like, I'm going to do this for my parents because I started this, or because I'm sure there was opportunities for you to just kind of bail out and focus on the label?
Oh yeah. I think I failed out more than once. I know I did once, but they were just like, yeah, your grades aren't high enough for us to keep you here. Let us know if you have a rebuttal. And I had to meet with the head of the school and be like, yeah, I want to do this. Let me do it.
Wow.
I'll try to graduate. And I think that happened maybe twice, but for 7 years. That's how long it took me, because I eventually had to start going part-time because I was just, going crazy.
Sure. And what degree did you end up getting as you graduated college?
I got a degree in advertising and marketing.
Okay.
And whenever I tell someone that, they're like, oh, so you learned a lot of stuff that you could apply to your business. That I didn't at all. I really didn't learn anything.
Yeah.
If anything, I already knew the stuff we were learning, and we'd have advertising projects, and I would know how to, design an ad. I knew how to use Photoshop, and I would make something that actually looked like a real ad, and people would just be like, who are you? Get out of this class. I was like, gladly, I will leave. I don't need to be here.
Right. Well, it is funny because especially with the, at the time, you didn't even know the sort of do-it-yourself nature of, building corn websites. That action in and of itself is completely applicable to later in life, where you were just like, yeah, I know how to put this together. And then people are like, what? Well, you could have been doing this when you were 11 or 12, but you were busy I don't know, like having friends or hanging out, but you're like, no,
Yeah.
I'm busy doing this.
Yeah.
Something that I know that you struggled with, that a lot of people kind of tagged Run for Cover, especially at the beginning, like you mentioned, and you make no bones about how you didn't know you were doing. But everyone was like, oh man, Jeff from Run for Cover, kind of a dick, didn't send me my mail order. Like that was a rep that existed for a long time, mostly from the fact that it was like because you were so overwhelmed. And so I'm not saying that about you currently, but was it one of those things like that was, a thing that you were beating yourself up with because of all of those sort of external voices coming at you where it's like, oh yeah, don't order from Run for Cover because you won't get an order.
Yeah, no, that was definitely the worst. Obviously I knew that it was an issue, it was just like, it seemed impossible to actually wrap my head around everything, and it's not like you can just be like, screw it. Like, I'm done with this. I'm done with this tomorrow. Like you still owe all those people, what they've ordered, and you still have to deal with it all. There's no out. So it was really frustrating. I remember some thread on the Bridge 9 message board being like, oh, I didn't get my order from this record label, whatever. And all these people saying shit. And my friend like instant messaged me about it. And I just remember being like, dude, like, do you think I can like come back from this? Like, do you think that I can actually save this and like save this reputation of this record label? And he's like, dude, totally, like, no problem. Just like do the best you can and do it. And, give nobody any reason to say something bad about you. And I was just like, all right, like this is going to take some work, but I guess it probably is possible.
Unfortunately, by transitive property, people that say that they don't receive their order or whatever, and because you are the only person that's doing it, like I said, by transitive property, they're like, Jeff is the worst person in the world. Like,
yeah, totally. Which is fine. That's totally fair.
Right.
Maybe not the worst person in the world, but I ripped them off. It was me. Not that I actually rip people off, but it was me personally that was pissing people off. The blame can't be placed anywhere else. Right.
And so that, that's hard when you were at the level that you were at, where it's like you still were getting your sea legs. Was it difficult for that criticism to kind of, sit in your head? And did you get, I know that you were having a difficult time, obviously adjusting with it, but did you, or did you just not have time to like be depressed about it and mope about it?
No, it definitely bummed me out. I don't think I really like talked about it a lot, but it definitely was the number one most stressful thing for me.
And as you were doing this in conjunction with college, and your parents were kind of seeing, I'm sure your parents were noticing the, emotional and physical toll. Were they just like, Jeff, stop this dumb record label? Like, what were they saying to you as this was happening?
Definitely not that. Never anything negative. I mean, I wouldn't have started the label without them. They were crazy enough to give me a $1,000 loan to put out a 7-inch, which is still crazy to me. Like, why would you do that? Why would you give a 15-year-old kid $1,000 to start a business? But right. They've never been anything but supportive. I don't think that they really thought there was a lot of potential for it to end up, as my career, obviously, especially in the beginning before it happened. But as it went on and, we kept not losing our ass on records we were putting out, I think that they kind of got that, I had a knack for something. I don't think they really totally grasped the negative stuff that was going on. Or not they didn't grasp, I don't think they were totally aware of it. Talking to my dad about it and just be like, oh, like I'm kind of blowing it, like all these people are mad, and he would kind of just brush it off and be like, don't worry about it, that's like what running a business is like or something. But I was in my head, I'd be like, no, I'm actually totally fucking it up.
Right, you're like, Dad, you don't understand this. Yeah. I have 150 pre-orders and they're not leaving my house.
Dad, don't you read the Bridge 9 board?
Yeah, exactly. You're like, the world is falling down right now. Did you ever experience like sort of like face-to-face criticism, like where kids coming up to you at shows and be like, yo, that's fucking Jeff, man. Like let's run him out of town or anything like that.
Definitely was a fear of mine, only because I'm definitely not confrontational in any way. That would happen, probably happened like 3 times total, and I would just be really nice and, fix their issue immediately, or, give them the money back. Or if it was like at something like Sound and Fury and we were selling stuff, I would just like give them what they ordered then, or, give them a free shirt or something. Right. I think once people met me, they kind of realized like, oh, this dude's like completely normal. He's just not great at what he's doing currently.
Right. Well, and yeah, and I don't mean to belabor that point, but I just think it's such a, the internet is devoid of context. And I think a lot of people that look at Run for Cover now are like, oh my gosh, like, dude, you guys are like just knocking it out of the park and you're killing it and whatever. And it's like, there's a lot of struggle that defines how you've gotten to where you're at. And I think some of that is, for lack of a better term, just like brushed off because it's only a minor part of your story. But I think that's what, that's why I am obviously bringing it up on more than one occasion, because it's just I think it's a really important footnote to realize that, most people suck at what they do when they first start it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. How could you not?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so then, was it this huge weight that was lifted off your shoulder once you got out of college and you could, sort of concentrate on the label from a full-time perspective?
Yeah, like more so than I could even put into words. The fact that I got my degree, it was just like I couldn't even believe that I graduated. It's like I literally never have to worry about school again. It just didn't seem like a realistic thing.
Right, like this, the world, I guess, has opened up.
Yeah, and everyone else that I graduated with. Literally didn't know anyone in my classes or in my college. I just, I showed up. Sometimes I'd show up and then I would just go straight home. Everyone was just like, yeah, we're graduating, but like, what do we do now? And I was like, haha, like, that's where I got you. I already know what I'm doing. It might have taken me 7 years to graduate, but I have a job the fucking day I graduate.
Right. Yeah, there's literally no choice for me to go but here.
Yeah.
I think an important point I always bring up too in regards to people such as that are in the position of yourself, where, now that obviously Run for Cover, has people working for you, and you obviously have to take, for lack of a better term, a more boss-like role. That's something that I presume that you don't either identify with, or it's something that you're still learning how to do and be. Because no one starts something and is like, dude, I can't wait to be a boss. Like, I can't wait to supervise people. So how do you feel like that is going with you in your own head, and then obviously from a practical standpoint as well?
I definitely don't identify with that role whatsoever, or feel like I even need to, act like a boss in any way.
Right.
With Tom coming on, who obviously, I guess that was 2011 when we hired him, and he was, besides having people help out with mail order, was the first employee. He is pretty much responsible for the company still existing now. And he currently, however many years later, handles so much of the day-to-day stuff. But yeah, being a boss isn't really a part of my role. It's more so pushing the company into the direction that I think it should go in, Mm-hmm. It's rare that I even need to be telling people what to do. People understand their roles, and it's a pretty clear cut path. Sometimes people will be like, hey, we finished these projects, do you got anything to do? And then that's really it. It's kind of a well-oiled machine at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And did you, as you started to bring people on, from Tom and obviously Alex and other people that you have now, I'm sure you do obviously feel the sort of pressure and weight that it is of people looking to you for, a livelihood, as it were.
Yeah. I mean, it's so different than what it was like before. It's kind of crazy to think back to when everything, was on my shoulders, and now it's just it's relatively stress-free, which is awesome. And, I feel so lucky to be in, a situation where my job doesn't put stress on me or, bum me out all the time. And I think obviously that's a rare thing to have. And I'm just super grateful that I'm in that situation, because if I wasn't, I don't know what situation I would be in.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's that poses an interesting question. So obviously if the label didn't exist, or the label existed on a much smaller level, do you think you would kind of would you want to jump in the record label world, or would you, kind of stick to sort of an advertising marketing sort of thing?
I really don't know. The only conclusion I can come to is that I would probably end up doing something involved with computers, whether it's coding or, something along those lines. I'm by no means close to being a professional in any of that stuff. But if I hadn't put, 5 million hours into, starting a record label in the last 10 years, obviously would have had the time to get pretty proficient at it.
Right. Yeah, no, for sure. And so, kind of where Run for Cover has existed, obviously, since you've had a staff and you yourself have been able to focus more on the sort of larger vision of Run for Cover and where you want to take it. You guys have definitely made some statements and definitive steps away from obviously the bedrock or foundation of what Run for Cover was back in the day, because obviously that's what most labels do, because you can't just release a hardcore band 7-inch forever and ever and ever. I presume that was obviously a vision that you really believed in, where it's like, okay, we don't want to be just defined as sort of hey, we're just a hardcore label or we're a pop punk label or whatever. I presume that was obviously very deliberate on your part.
Yeah, I mean, more so in the last years, I would say. This is obviously something that we get asked a lot, and the best way that I can explain, why and how we've changed is just when we started, I was 11 years younger than I am now, and as I've gotten older, the music that I'm interested in listening to and also releasing, has changed while I've grown up. But I think the people that were in tune to the label early on, have also obviously grown up at the same rate that I have. I think that there's people who, have stayed interested in the label despite it changing so much because they've grown up with it changing,
Culturally speaking, I definitely feel like there's far less feedback from people being like, oh, dude, whatever, Run for Cover. Yeah, you're just trying to cash in on the movement or whatever. Whatever those cheesy, disparaging remarks that can be made. When criticism first started to be thrown your direction like that, was it just a minor blip from obviously what you experienced at the beginning, where it was like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that stuff is funny because, you could make any statement like that and I could prove it wrong, people would talk about genre hopping or perpetuating we genres like 90s revival or new gaze or whatever. But the stuff that when we were putting out records for the Wonder Years of Man Overboard and Title Fight and Transit, those bands weren't popular when we started working with them. We didn't make them popular. I knew they were all going to be popular anyway, but we started working with them, that whole scene of bands got really popular, and then it was just kind of well, we did that, let's do something else now. That's how I thought of it. It was just well, we kind of just conquered the East Coast melodic punk scene. What's the point of still doing that? Yeah,
that's a really, I think that's kind of a very important point, especially for record labels of the size of, because obviously whatever, Run for Cover, No Sleep, Top Shelf, all of our labels get mentioned in the same sentence. Tiny Engines can also be thrown in that loop. But I think each label has their own, the same sort of principle that you talk about applies to every single label, where it's obviously there is, there's a predilection for labels to be okay, this was successful, so let's sign 4 other bands like it. But that's, to me, that's what obviously major labels chase after, rather than labels of all that size, because it's that's only sort of sustainable, rather than the idea of being oh yeah, I think we put out what I feel is the best representation of this music at this current juncture, and so let's move on from there.
Yeah. I think we kind of were very deliberate about it, which is kind of weird, because we kind of just stopped doing that stuff pretty quickly. But yeah, there hasn't been any crazy backlash about us putting out different styles of music. It's a pretty strange thing to complain about, but it definitely has happened.
Yeah, of course. There's the internet.
Yeah, there sure is.
I just want to hit on 2 more things where, one of them is the fact that you obviously, another deliberate, I wouldn't even say change, but a focus of your label is getting to know each of the individual people that sort of make up the label from a staff perspective, and less about you, because you definitely take more of a backseat role from that perspective. But I presume this was just something that you and Alex kind of put your heads together and just hey, this would be, I guess engaging or endearing for people to know who it is that works at this label and packs their orders and kind of makes things tick?
I mean, yeah, that wasn't actually a deliberate thing, and I've never even really thought about that to that extent. With like our staff specifically, but that obviously is the point of all of our, video content and stuff, is just to engage people and give them something, to pass the time and be entertained with. But yeah, now that I think about it, I guess it is funny to like that Tay is the person that packs people's orders, and people obviously like seeing the people that work at a record label, I guess, which, doesn't seem that interesting to me because it's just these people that I see every day.
Right.
But I guess, from other people's perspective, you don't really see that stuff a lot. I guess I can't really think of, I mean, I don't even know why you would think to do it. It wasn't even a goal of ours, but obviously it's something that people are interested in. And I guess it does make sense to be curious about, behind the scenes of a company that you're interested in.
Yeah, because I think, speaking just from my own perspective, what I enjoy about it is just the fact that it's like it invests people more in what you're doing. Like the more people get to know, obviously you and everybody else that comprises Run for Cover, they're invested more in the label as a whole, because it's not just like this, sort of weird faceless identity. It's like, why do you think people pay attention to Death Wish? Obviously, they release great music, but initially it's because, it's Jake from Converge's label. Like, of course, there's those immediate sort of leg ups and advantages, but then it's like if you're able to sort of develop that genuine connection, which is obviously what you guys have done, where it's like there's people that probably hate Run for Cover. They're like, yo, dude, Tuesdays with Tay is like the best.
Yeah. Or people who don't even know that it's a record label that produces Tuesdays with Tay.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. The last thing I want to hit on was the fact, like we joked about before we were recording, where you were saying that you typically don't hop at the opportunity to do interviews. Is it one of those things that's just because you feel like it obviously is a large time investment and you want to present yourself appropriately, or is it one of those things you're just like, yo, they're super awkward?
I guess like a combination of the two. I'm a lot better at like writing than speaking in general. And, you haven't done this at all in this interview, but sometimes I'll do interviews over the phone where I just like don't even really understand what they're asking, So
yeah.
I have no idea how to answer the question, or, just questions that don't even have answers like we talked about before. That's just happened, it just makes me feel weird. And then I'll hang up and be like, man, I sounded like an idiot during that.
Yeah.
Or, I've been like misquoted to just like, or maybe not even misquoted. It might have even been stuff I said that just didn't make any sense.
Right.
That's been printed in, alternative press, and I'll just like look at it and be like, what was I talking about? Like, it makes me want to email the person that interviewed me and be like, hey, can you like send me this whole transcript so I can just edit it for you so I can say what I want to say and not sound like a bumbling fool the whole time.
Right. Well, there's also something that obviously the internet and print has the inability to do. Sometimes it's providing context, where it's like if you have to edit for length, that's rough, because sometimes you'll get a rad pull quote where Jeff says, oh, we hate Warped Tour. It's like, whoa, wait, I didn't say that. I said we hated that one day we went to Warped Tour because it was hot. Like,
Yeah, except I probably did say that. So
no, exactly. Kind of a tangential question to that is that you yourself are from what I would define, you're a more private person. Like, you obviously, exist in social media, and you obviously communicate and, show bits and pieces of your life. But there's definitely people that take more of an active role with that, where, you, just from my perspective, are less apt to share that. Is there truth in that? Or do you kind of like, are there intentional things that you kind of like, yeah, I want to keep this away from sort of the label spotlight, as it were?
It's not like that. So much. I think, I used to be involved with like the video stuff a lot more. And I think Alex kind of just silently came to the conclusion that I kind of feel weird about it, just talking on camera, and, it just kind of makes me uncomfortable. Not in a way that I wouldn't do it. It's just like everyone else is totally cool with it. So it's way better when everyone else is involved with it than when I am, I think in general, I'm a little reserved. I'm not super outgoing, but, not reserved in a way that makes things weird. It's just, I don't love attention or like, having the spotlight on me, I would say. Not for some crazy, like insecure reasons, I'd rather not get attention than get attention.
Right.
I think.
Yeah, you'd rather not be the guy that shows up to the party that's like, "Hey, Jeff's here." It's like, "Oh, hey, there's Jeff."
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying. I'd
rather just not go to the party, probably.
Right. You'd rather not go to the party and create another corn fan site.
Yeah. Actually, I probably am more likely to be doing that than being at a party.
I don't think there's any better way of ending it like that. Well, go have a good birthday, and thank you so much, Jeff. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ralph.
So that was Jeff, and that is what is in his head. I was really happy to have that conversation because it's funny. Sometimes the label owner episodes don't generally do as well. Like, I don't know if people are just less interested in what a person is like that is putting out records. I don't know. But I hope that this one gets some attention and traction and people decide to share this episode because I just think dude, you're buying music from a label and you become kind of invested in their business. Like, wouldn't you want to know the person who's kind of behind that in a way? So anyways, thank you to Jeff. I really appreciate him taking the time out of his day on his birthday, nonetheless. So that's when we recorded it, and I felt bad. I was like, "Oh, Jeff, don't you want to be spending time with someone else on your birthday?" But he was more than willing to hang out with me for around an hour on that day. The producer, as always, is Tom Richfield. Visit 100wordspodcast.com. And next week, I'll bring you another great episode, but prepare for April. Just batten down the hatches. I'm going to try to set the internet on fire with all the guests. I mean, I won't actually set the internet on fire because that's, the show is not at that level. But I have some great guests lined up for April and beyond. There's so many fun things coming our way as a collective show/family. So thank you for joining me on this ride. Till next week, be safe, everybody.